Good evening, everybody, and good afternoon for whatever time zone you're joining us. This is Higher Ed Live. My name is Brandon Croak, and I am guest hosting. Tonight, we're going to be talking about digital development for students in higher education and what role really should higher education play in students' digital identity development and digital citizenship training. I've got a great panel of guests that I want to introduce. But before we do that, we want to thank our sponsors here for this show. So Omni Update is the leading web content management system for higher education. The company's web CMS OU Campus is secure, scalable with great tools and features, deployment flexibility, and an awesome user community. Omni Update CMS saved Utah Valley's University $58,000 and an estimated $10,000 annually in hardware data center costs. So find out how. We're tweeting the link out now. Higher Ed Live is also brought to you by Integral, the creators of the Schools app, a private social network designed to engage students, improve enrollment and intention. Check out our latest infographic on how high school students use social media in their college search and decision-making process. We're also tweeting that link out now. Now, I have to say, I work at Integral. I run marketing for Integral, the creators of the Schools app, but we're not here to talk about Integral or Schools app. We're really not here to talk about marketing for social media. Traditionally on Higher Ed Live and a lot of the conferences I go to, we're talking about social media and how to engage students from kind of an institutional perspective. So I've always really loved Higher Ed Live and the community there and what we can talk about, and I wanted to change the typical things that we get to kind of discuss and really focus more on the student perspective. So how are we training students in this new digital world we're living in, and kind of whose responsibility is it to talk about students' digital identity, how students should use or perceive social media, and our college is really equipped to do this right now. So I've got an expert panel that I want to introduce real quick. First, I'm going to start with Hillary, who is to my right. She's the author of One White Face. She's a speaker and an entrepreneur and a student development advocate. Right now, she's out promoting her book and speaking about how students can be global citizens and the importance of taking risks. And I want you to say hi to @Hillary Corda, one of my dear friends, and she's joining us live from Austin, Texas.
Hello.
Hey. And then I want to, right next to Hillary is Maayan Plout. She's a social media coordinator at Oberlin College, and she is going to bring a perspective that basically I'm not exactly sure what she's going to bring, but I know we've always had these types of conversations, which I've really enjoyed. So I'm happy to have her on the show as well.
Hi, I am going to bring whatever I need to bring. I've previously taught, I guess, two experimental classes in social media here at Oberlin, and have partnered a lot with Mary Claire, who you can introduce next, to talk about digital identity development in particular for conservatory students.
Awesome. And Mary Claire Brisbois, I hope I pronounced that correctly, is the director of Conservatory and Professional Development at Oberlin College. Oberlin College located in Ohio. Big fan over here. And she's going to be talking a little bit about her experience using working with students. I'd love for her to just kind of go ahead and introduce herself and some of the things she's worked on.
My name is Mary Claire Brisbois. I work with the students at Oberlin Conservatory on a wide variety of things, ranging from audio and video post-production, so creating content and videos to market themselves and to apply to things ranging from professional auditions, graduate school, and I help them build their websites, and I try to talk to them about critical thinking and blogging and documenting their process in a way that they can use to sell themselves. So it's a big job, but someone has to do it.
Awesome. All super important stuff, especially if somebody's going to be kind of an artist in the 21st century and support themselves by producing, their art. And then last but not least, to my right is Mari, and she is actually an intern at Integral. She's a high school senior, and I'll have her just introduce herself shortly.
Hi everyone, my name is Mari Galliser, and I'm a high school senior at Lowell in San Francisco, and next year I'm going to be headed to NYU.
Great. So I love the panel that we have tonight because we really all bring a different perspective from the story. And we've got Mari. She's a high school senior. She's going off into college. And the past few weeks, we've been having a lot of conversations around her peer groups and what they're using social media for and what their perceptions are of social media and as they're going off to college. And I really want to just kind of take us through a series of questions, and we can each kind of go around and share our takes on how students are kind of using digital media to portray themselves and really how they're using it in their daily lives. So digital identity development is specifically defined as how you portray yourself online and really the data and data trail you're leaving as you're kind of doing all these activities. And so I want to talk about that, and that is what I call like personal branding for students. But I also want to talk into some of the other topics, which is like how students are using the internet and social media to learn and find jobs, and what role colleges should play, and even some reasons why digital and social media can be holding students back. So first I want to talk about personal branding. And Mari, could you tell me a little bit about how, as a high school student right now, students are thinking about their personal brand as they're going off to college? I mean, that's your job right now isn't to get a job necessarily. You're looking to get into the institution of your dream. So how are students kind of adapting their personal identity online right now?
Right. So I think that what students now have a really negative perception of the potential of social media to be in their lives. And I think that they look at social media as a tool to, connect and show off what's going on with their lives to their friends. But to other people other than their friends, they view it as a really negative influence. They view it as a possibility to get them, kicked out of school for, some pictures, or to not get into a college because of something like that too.
Interesting. So I don't know if any of the other panelists have a perspective. It sounds to me that like students aren't thinking themselves as a part of a global community when they're engaging online. They're really just there with their friends, kind of sharing these things that are only kind of whispered outside of the classroom. Does anybody else kind of have a similar perception when they've kind of been working with students?
Yeah, actually, absolutely. For me, I manage our incoming class group at Oberlin, and there's always one thread that usually turns into like 6 threads of, hey, everybody share your Twitter handle or your Tumblr site or whatever. And like halfway through, someone's like, wait, are the admissions people gonna read what we post on Tumblr or on Twitter? And the admissions counselor in the group and myself are like, listen, you can do whatever you want. We are interested in you being creative. We're interested in you exploring. But honestly, we don't have time to read every single thing you post online. If you tag it with Oberlin, we'll probably find it. We'll probably respond to it. If it's really awesome, we'll give you like a thumbs up or a heart or something. But beyond that, like, we just don't have time. But at least our students are thinking about it, and that they're recognizing that there may be people in the room with them, digital or otherwise, that would possibly find them online. And they're thinking about, what does it mean? Will my application be revoked? Will you mark me down on something? So it's on the mind of our students for sure.
And from our experience working with admissions offices is that they really don't have the time to go through and search out students online and kind of dock them admissions points. The only time I've really heard of an admissions professional using social media to research a student is if the student sounds too good to be true. And that the student is like, oh my goodness, there's something doesn't quite fit here. I want to do some more research and kind of see if the kind of identity matches up.
Right, and I think that just the small, minuscule chance that an admissions counselor could find something bad about a student online makes this huge movement towards all these students just, changing their Facebook last names, hiding, making their Twitter private, making everything on Facebook private. Just that tiny chance that someone could find them makes them have like that certain fear.
Definitely. Now, Mary Claire, I want to turn to you because I think once you get into college, and I could see why students in high school are kind of having that lockdown mindset. But when you're graduating college, from my perspective, you really want to take a different approach, where you want to open everything up as you're trying to kind of connect with the world. Will you share your perspective of working? I'm guessing you're working with students that are going to be graduating or maybe later stages in the college career?
I kind of work with all types, really, on a variety of topics. And it's very interesting, the different perspectives that I see, because a lot of these students are really, really influenced by their teachers. Specifically in the conservatory, there's a very sacred relationship between the private instrumental teacher and the student. And a lot of these faculty members are very guarded about what they will allow the students to post and what they won't allow them to post. Particularly, students are very sensitive about posting a bad performance, posting video of their recitals, and I'm encouraging them to post things regularly so that by the time they're a senior, they've developed a good practice for representing themselves online. that these can be teaching tools for self-marketing. So, but what I see a lot of the time is students right before they graduate come in and they ask me, how do I do this stuff? Can you help me make a website? I need to put a recording up of my recital. And by that time, I'm always a little bit like, really? Like you haven't, like you're an artist and you haven't thought about what you want to put and what you don't want to put? Like there's a huge disconnect, I find, between the academic work and the presentation of the academic work, what they do in school versus what they're willing to share. And they're genuinely, a lot of times, very confused about what's appropriate to share and what's not. So a lot of what I talk to them about is, you know, taking risks, letting something develop over time, looking at the larger body of the work, and people will be interested to see the arc of someone's creative development. So I spend a lot of time with my students talking about documenting process and then having another place where final presented work lives and how to connect these things into their social network, social media, website, all these things. There's a lot going on in my field, in the conservatory. There's a lot of talk about whether these students should be putting their work on the internet or not. And of course, I think they should, and they should be working it into their creative process and learning these tools, multimedia, video, audio, creating content. But a lot of the older faculty seem very concerned about poor quality work being presented in any way. So it's a lot of it is aesthetics. I mean, a lot of the conversations I feel that go on in my office are like about aesthetics more than about social media for the arts.
Interesting, fascinating. So I would love to hear a little bit more about that. I know we haven't had a chance to kind of chat before, but I wanted to pass it over to Hillary, who is really speaking with a lot of college students right now, and I feel like she gets a lot of outreach from her speaking and her book tour when she spent 3 years working in Asia with Toyota. Hillary, what do you said that what generation Y and Z is defining as a career is changing and personal branding is becoming more important for these students. Could you explain more about that?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because Mary Claire mentioned about, you know, being particularly relevant for the arts, and I think it's relevant no matter whether you're in the arts or you're a business major, you're a communications major. Really comes down to how you're presenting yourself, as you mentioned, Mary Claire. And so I think you're absolutely touch on a really important point, which is the difference between the creative process and trying and failing and the learning lessons versus what you're actually presenting. So, you know, people approach me all the time. I just got tweeted this week by a student saying, hey, you need to teach me how to use LinkedIn. And I'm like, first of all, no, I don't need to teach you how to use LinkedIn. I could, but I imagine that there's a lot better questions you could be asking me, and my question is, why aren't these kids learning this? And I get approached by people all the time, that students who try to befriend on Facebook. So I kindly, in the beginning, I used to send them individual messages saying, hey, please find me on LinkedIn, and they'd say, well, what's LinkedIn? Why should I be in LinkedIn? I'm only in college. And I'm like, oh my God. So it's really about not so much doing it as an objective, or it's really just about using a tool. Like, they're all just tools to get by better in life, right? So whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Facebook, social media is just a tool to do something better. So if you're in college and you're not thinking about what you're going to do upon graduation while you're in college, you know, you're obviously not thinking about social media being one of those tools to do that. So, yeah, I think it's misunderstood. I mean, your perfect example is the high school student sitting next to you who said that people don't think of it, you know, they think of it as a way to brag about themselves rather than as a way to promote what it is they're trying to do in their life. And just that, I mean, that's a part of maturity and growth, but just that way of thinking is going to be something that's going to be interesting to watch how it develops with Gen Y and Gen X over the next few years.
Can I just, yeah, I totally understand what you mean, and I think that a lot of students now do view social media as a way to kind of chronicle the past instead of looking forward. So instead of using it as a tool to further themselves in the future, they're looking at social media as a way to take pictures, leave statuses, comment on each other's stuff, and keep that record of the past and, you know, show off what they're doing now, but not really looking towards the future.
And from my perspective, I got my last 3 jobs using social media, mainly through Twitter, reaching out, connecting with people, and I was hired and then actually, you know, succeeded, quote unquote, in the jobs because I was using social media to learn, you know, connect with thought leaders in the industry, go figure out which conferences to go to, follow along on hashtags, download white papers and research studies. And I mean, that's really how I got to. And I remember I was a senior in college. I was talking to one of the professors in our marketing department in class, and he mocked me in class for mentioning that I was using social media and thought it was really important. And he kind of scoffed at it and said, "This is a fad. There's, you know, you're probably wasting your time on, you know, the Facebook or whatever." And this was when I was getting really into Twitter and blogging, and was so inspired by the potential that I could connect with anybody in the world, learn anything in the world, and I was kind of driven enough to do that. I'm one of the only people in my majors that I know that works in marketing because I was willing to do that. And so I have a tough time. I don't know what the role of the college really should be, because I think it's hard to force this down a student's throat that you should use these tools in this particular way. And I can imagine if I were to go in front of a classroom and tell this to students, I'm not sure if they would, you know, necessarily listen or not. Mayan, do you have any take from your experience teaching students with social media?
Oh, so this is interesting. This didn't actually come up in the experimental college class that I was teaching, but it came up. I did 2 guest lectures and the professional development for the freelance artist, which is a class in the conservatory. And I met with the professor before talking to the class, and she said, you're going to need to hard sell whatever tool you tell the students to use, because at this point it is hard to know if they're even going to listen to you if they don't know what the value of it is themselves. So I took that as I need to show some success story before I even try and tell them why the tool is really important. So the 2 tools that I taught them about were using Tumblr as a simple website builder and blogging platform, and About.me as like a social calling card. And I brought both those things up, and I used my versions of them as examples for both those tools, and said, this is how I've gotten good use out of each one of these things, and this is how I don't know what your passion is, but we can figure it out. This is how you can utilize each one of these things for your own benefit. So we basically broke it down into very simple parts, and it worked. I don't know that everybody ended up using Tumblr for any purpose or not, but by the end of the class, because About.me is so incredibly simple, we actually set them up during the class time. So while there's reticence, they recognize they did need to be online at least a little bit. And between myself and Mary Claire, we've been convincing more and more people to use About.me for any number of reasons, which has been really, really cool, because at this point there's a lot of Oberlin people using them, and that's a start. That's a really good start in my book.
Great.
Yeah, I agree. We have in our conservatory, we have something called a gig referral service, where people from the community can call up and they can request to hire a student performer at an event of some kind. And when I first arrived, it literally consisted of a bulletin board, like a real live, old-fashioned bulletin board. And what Mayan and I kind of did is we made a Tumblr page where these students could market themselves. So now it's kind of, they have to be competitive in their presentation in order to get the gig. And they've all started using About.me to make these really great pages where they market themselves as performers. And it's worked out. Using those 2 things together has become a very Oberlin Conservatory kind of thing.
That is awesome.
And I want to first commend you on your work, because I don't hear too many stories about it. I'm sure there's many other people that work at universities who are doing innovative things, but I can imagine. Can you tell me a little bit about this? Is something that Hillary kind of mentioned, is that if some of the faculty are not necessarily trained or don't see the importance of this, the kind of conflict maybe somebody with your perspective has with somebody from the other side of the digital divide, if you will.
Well, it hasn't been that bad. I mean, it could be really bad, but luckily Oberlin is the kind of place where nobody's directly told me, no, don't do that. And I've kind of had to win the faculty over one by one by helping them with their own web pages. That's been one way that I've teaching them how to do it for themselves and letting them, know that they can have control over these things. A lot of it, I think, boils down to a lack of education about how they work. And then once they realize that they could use it for themselves, they kind of calm down. Another thing, I mean, they're very, very concerned about their students being on the internet before they've finished their training. They want them to put their best foot forward. So one of the things I try and tell them is, we can, get the students, on a lower searchability kind of platform. They're using a free web. I don't even know if this is true all the time. I mean, I'll be totally honest. I'm not even sure if what I'm telling them is true all the time in this regard. But, I have them using like Weebly. And my understanding of Weebly is that it's a much lower power. If you were to search someone on Weebly, it doesn't come up quite as high as if it was on WordPress or something. And I try and put in the context of that these are internal exercises for learning. We're using them in our own little internal Oberlin Conservatory musical economy that I'm trying to create, this virtual economy where there's opportunities within the college for funding and marketing, and that seems to work. I think when I frame it as a tool for learning as opposed to I'm telling these students to go out and put themselves on the world stage, that seems to go over better. So if that helps your question, yeah, that answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's really any right or wrong answers. I just really kind of wanted to play around and have some dialogue really from all of our perspectives. And maybe my goal was to kind of come away with some key takeaways after our discussion that we could kind of write a blog post about and say, hey, from all of our perspectives, we agreed these are 3 things that are important to do or to not do. And really just continue the conversation in the higher ed community, which I know is happening. This year I've seen blog posts, and from the past year from Eric Stoller, from Ed Cabellin, from Rebecca Ramspot, who are all talking about students' digital identity, and I'm super happy to see those posts. I feel like it's just not getting a lot of coverage, and I feel like somebody in the institution should really be, higher ed needs to be taking a leadership role in digital education, I believe, to kind of train these students to be digitally literate and to present themselves well and to be kind of productive members of a global citizenship online. I really feel like this is so important, but the leadership in higher ed right now might not be in the best position to kind of give the recommendations, and really nobody is right now. You were saying you're not 100% sure if this is the right way to do it, and I would say that we're all kind of experimenting and kind of living through this experiment. So I think it's just an important dialogue to be continually having to see where the potholes are, where the opportunities are. I wanted to talk a little bit of something about what you were saying, that giving students an experimental place. Talking about tips. Anybody out there who's looking to improve their digital identity? One thing I did was I would start blogs under a name that wasn't necessarily connected to me, so I could practice writing and just kind of experimenting with videos or whatever. And I could end up deleting it, and it gave me an ability to get more comfortable with my blogging before I was ready to kind of put on a little bit more polish to it. And I feel like that's something that you were doing with the musical students a little bit, and I definitely recommend that. Now,
I kind of have a question
that
tags along with that. So once you get a student interested in getting involved in that higher ed community and kind of putting themselves out there in the digital higher ed world, how do you get them connected with the kind of community that they want to be connected with? Like, for example,
it's really hard. But please continue.
Yeah, for example, like the student performers, like how do you get them connected with opportunities? I mean, it's great to take that first step towards putting themselves out there and putting themselves online and having a positive presence online. But then once you're there, what happens if it just, they hit a brick wall and then they're like, okay, well, this isn't helping me,
Well, I can give you several examples if that helps. So I have some students that come in and they kind of all do the same thing that they've seen their teachers do, which is they put on a pretty dress, they take a high glossy def picture with their violin or their flute, and they're not really differentiating themselves from the pack. And I try to explain to them, the whole idea of this is to make me want to hire you. And so I need to know more about you than that you wear a pretty dress and you play the violin. Like, own this. Go in your bedroom and take a bunch of pictures of objects in your bedroom and put them in Photoshop and spend some time thinking about yourself. So, you know, it doesn't have to be this totally deep philosophical thing, but, you know, be honest, be organic. So that's one. And then, you know, the other thing that's been happening a lot is for artists, particularly looking for funding. They're creating videos for like Indiegogo campaigns. So learning how to research where their skills fit into the field and where the field is going, and how to be present in those places and take part in the conversation at hand. So if I had a student who's interested in contemporary music, I would be like, you should be reading all of these blogs about contemporary music. These are the 5 major ensembles in New York. Look what's happening in New York. Make Facebook friends. Follow these people on Twitter. Then look at this collective in LA. That's its equivalent. And let's follow them. What's going on in LA that's different? And the idea is by taking this in over the course of 4 years, they would start to make their own artistic choices and kind of shape themselves with an understanding of the field. And hopefully by the time they're done, they'll be contributing to the field and the way the field is going. So I have those conversations with a lot of them. Some of them do amazing things. Some of them are like deer in the headlights. So it's all levels of skills and creativity and risk takers.
Mary Claire, do you have a position that you kind of call yourself? Are you this digital tour guide? Are you this digital? What do you call that? I think that what you're describing is literally what we need more of, and we can't have it until we have a name for it. I mean.
Well, I'm director of conservatory professional development. The faculty people call me the career lady. So career services, career lady.
I feel like why does there even need to be a position for that? I feel like that kind of the social media skills are something that's, you know, coming along with the times, and that they should be integrated to whatever kind of position that. I agree. It should be integrated into their private lessons. I think that this should be a requirement for anyone who's teaching in the arts. It's just here to stay. But it's a conservatory, so it's teaching a tradition that's from the 1700s and the 1800s. So it's a really complicated topic, especially when you're working with people who are training for something so traditional.
Absolutely, and I love the perspective, because I would never have thought, coming from a conservatory perspective, of this, you know, kind of social media conversation. But it really fits in, as Hillary was saying, with any major that you should be kind of connecting and learning from other groups, and, you know, kind of presenting yourself online. Now, Hillary just dropped off for me. I was just going to ask her a question, but I don't. She's talking about how with me about how the resumes are kind of dead, and how students, you just kind of like, it's similar to the violin photo, that just because you have a professional headshot doesn't mean you're going to differentiate yourself. Similar as a resume, you're not going to, you know, just if you're just a name on a resume, it's not very it's not very personal. It doesn't make you stand out from 200 other resumes you're getting. From your perspective in working outside the conservatory, has Career Services or any of the other branches on campus reached out to you to kind of ask about social media and personal branding, or are things a little bit different, Overland?
So the Career Services office, yes. I actually spent, was it last week? Week before? There's a really cool event called Passing the Torch, which was an event that was dedicated to seniors who had previously gone through recent stuff at school. So applying to fellowships, trying to get internships, trying to get jobs, trying to go to grad school, whatever. All of that knowledge, it's all kind of in individuals' heads, getting all of those seniors into the room and inviting second and third years, so sophomores and juniors, into the room to be like, so this is something you may be interested in. We've done it already. Where can we help you? We could just basically list everything that you can do class-wise, internship-wise, winter term-wise, summer-wise. These are people to talk to on campus that you might not have thought about talking to before. This is the best place to like start practicing for your MCAT or your GRE or whatever. And I went to this event because I was asked to sit at one of the tables and talk about online personal branding, which I made this like crazy like bookmark with a meme on the top that said something like, social media, I can't tell if it's the future or just a way of life. I don't remember what it was. But in short, it was like a set of like 8 bullet points of, these are just some of the things that you need to be thinking about when it comes to online branding. So do you Google yourself? Do you talk to people about things? And then like the last one was whatever awesomeness you're interested in doing in person, do it a little bit online as well, and you'll be fascinated to see what who comes out of the woodwork to kind of talk about this. So it's definitely at play, but the first student who walked up to me during the session said, so I hear that you can help me make my LinkedIn better. How can we do it? And if Hillary were here, she'd probably go like this. But the short answer is the way that I look at LinkedIn and all of these other places, like that's the reason to use them is to have some sort of digital list of the people that you have some sort of relationship with or wish to have a relationship with. And in particular for me on LinkedIn, I don't use it for anything right now. Granted, I have a job that I love, so like I don't really need it to find a job. But the way I've seen people use it more and more in relation to me is looking through my connections and then asking me for an introduction to one of the connections. And then the next step always is if someone says, hey, I see that you're friends with so-and-so, can you connect me with them, is to go to the first person's LinkedIn profile, see what they've been up to professionally for the last month, couple of months, years, whatever, to inform myself better so I can then do that e-introduction across the board. And that is great. I mean, Brandon even knows this. Like, I helped to connect, like, one of my friends from here with Brandon when he was, like, at South by Southwest. So, like, it's not, your network is not connected only to the location you're at or the people that you're currently with. It's the people that your people know. So it's definitely on people's minds. But I don't know that it's coming out in academic form necessarily, but some of the offices are definitely thinking about it, at least to start.
And I think just to touch on what you're saying, I mean, so even though we're talking about social networks as a term of, you know, the technology, I want to write a blog post right now about how social networks are so important. It's basically our entire lives are the people who we are connected to. Nothing to do, technology, you know, not included. Everything, you know, our identity, when we're fitting in school, when we're making these transitions, finding jobs, it's all about our social networks. And I was just reading this book called Connected, which is a great book, and it's basically about how everything in our lives is informed through our social networks, and that not online, but just our actual social networks are the most influential, that happiness, wealth, disease, all spread through social networks, and people that are 2 connections away from you that you don't even know are having this impact in your life. And I just can't help but think, you know, as we're all being connected online now in this new way, it's this big experiment, and I wonder how these connections are really affecting us and whether there's kind of a positive or negative. I agree with you, Mayan. It's great to have, you know, LinkedIn. I have a LinkedIn profile, but I don't get that much value out of it. People connect LinkedIn, kind of a generic request, hey, I'd like to connect with you, and I'm like, great, you know, you could have just sent me an email, or like, I'd love to hear what you're up to, but I just think sometimes you can have all these connections and then you're not necessarily doing anything with them. And so that's my big question is, you can have any of these tools in the world, but what are you really doing and what are you trying to do? And that's not really a technology question, it's a human question. I think these tools can amplify that and help that, but really at the end of the day, and this is something that Hillary and I were talking about as well, is that it's not about the tool and the technology, it's about the human side of it. And these will just kind of project you forward in that motion. So talking about forward motion, Mari and I have been talking about kind of her personal identity online and kind of how she uses social media. So I've been encouraging her to use Twitter as a tool to connect with people and learn from them and kind of move forward into your future, because she's super bright and amazing. She's been doing amazing work at Integral. I just wanted her to share her experience with kind of what she was using Twitter for, and then kind of after our conversations we've been having is what she's trying to do with it.
Right. So when Brandon first came to me and it's like, oh, we need to have the Twitter talk, I was like, what? Like, I have a Twitter already. Like, you can back off, whatever. But then we started talking about it, and I looked at his Twitter, which was public, and I also, of course, had my Twitter, which is private, and the difference is like night and day what we used it for. I used it, like most of my peers, as just a kind of like a scrolling tool, basically where I was just like looking through people's tweets, maybe tweeting 1 or 2 things about my life, and mostly looking at other people's tweets, which were mostly like complaints about their lives and stuff. And I saw Brandon's Twitter was like more involved. He had like a lot of articles going on. He was following a lot of like interesting people. a lot of interesting people were following him. There's a lot more going on that was clearly beneficial towards his life in contrast to the kind of connections that were pretty meaningless in mine. And I think that kind of change, or like the kind of switch to like a more useful, a utilitarian kind of Twitter is really interesting, because when Brandon first approached me about that subject, I was just really confused and kind of honestly weirded out that even was a thing, that people use Twitter to like connect with each other. I thought it was just, like 160 characters, whatever. But I think that just shows like what a kind of bubble, I don't know, my generation or like high school students are in right now, where they're creating all these kind of one-sided conversations, or maybe tweeting, Facebook, Instagram, are all these social networks that aren't really like, they're not really connecting people and creating two-way conversations. They're kind of one-way conversations that are just exhibitionist about their lives, and can, maybe make them feel validated if they have a good follower ratio, or if they have a lot of likes on like their profile picture. But even that sense of validation isn't really helping me or helping any of my peers really further themselves in their careers. And so I feel like that's why this dialogue is super important, because not many high school students know that social media can be like a really great like educational and professional tool, and they view it as more of a hindrance towards education and
distraction.
Yeah, and I think distraction is a very real thing, and I kind of want to talk about this with social media and distraction, and with artists, because I feel like as myself, I'm trying to write a book about some of these topics, and instead of me sitting down and spending an hour and being very disciplined like Hillary was able to do, I find myself being really distracted and not being able to produce the art that I need to be, because there's Facebook, and you're checking that, and you're checking this, and so I think it's just really, really important that we're having these kind of conversations with students, and really analyzing what are students using these tools for. One of the biggest things that turns me off about talking about social media in higher education is this is kind of how the logic goes in the marketing realm when you're trying to promote your institution. It's students are on social media, so we need to be there. What are we going to do? And I'm like, well, what are students doing? How is this affecting their social, emotional, cognitive development? And I feel like that's the really important conversation. Sure, there's some research in it, but I was listening to a podcast from Common Sense Media, the CEO of Common Sense Media. I can't remember his name. It was Jim Strayer, and he was saying we're in the process of redefining the ethics of human communications, which is critical, fundamental in human relationships, and we're conducting the biggest experiment ever, kind of on this human scale with these technologies. And nobody's really, there's not a lot of guidance. And so they have a digital literacy program, which I plan on checking out, that's free for educators to talk to these students about these different things. But one thing that you kind of ask is, who is the authority to tell people how they should use the internet? There really isn't this authority. And sometimes, again, going back to social media conferences, I'll hear some expert come up, one of these they're literally the top, 1% of bloggers. And I heard this one woman do a speech at the CASE conference in Chicago, and I wanted to pull my ears out. I thought the stuff she was saying was so mindless and meaningless, and she's looked at as an expert. And so, I mean, I guess that's, sometimes the people that are at the top are, I guess it's my job to spread another message that they could be more meaningful. But
well,
go ahead, please.
Well, if I might, I went to a conference at the Manhattan School of Music in December, and it was all people that have my position from all the conservatories. And I signed up to a mailing list where they all, it's supposed to exist to share articles and resources. But this list is saturated with people who are promoting themselves as experts on this stuff. And it's the entire list. I mean, maybe you've seen this as well. But it really blows my mind, because some of these people are, I mean, not to be a discriminatory person when it comes to age, but a lot of these people are really significantly older than I am. And they're writing, I mean, they're trying to craft businesses as coaches in these fields, and they talk about digital media, and it's insane to me what an industry has become already, to be an expert on these topics. And I often feel a little weird myself being the expert in my job, and I don't claim to be an expert, but I'm just rolling my sleeves up and doing what needs to be done to get these students out there and working. And even when Mayan asked me to be on this panel to talk about these issues, I was even like, am I qualified? Am I qualified to be speaking? But I suppose I am, because I'm doing it every day and I'm trying to figure it out, and I'm definitely paying attention to all of it. I'm fascinated by all of it. So
I think that a lot of times, since like as a student, I've gone through basically the majority of my academic career using social media and it just being there and not really having to like learn something. Like, yeah, I had to learn how to use Facebook instead of MySpace, big deal. But it's always been there and I've always known how to use them, and so have my peers. And so I feel like when someone older, someone authority figure comes in and says, oh, hey, I'm going to teach you how to use social media, they're going to have the same, if not worse, reaction I had to Brandon, which was like, what? I already know how to use social media. Why are you trying to tell me how to do it? And I also feel like there are even people who are not, like cool and like hip and work at startups and actually know how to use the social media. There are people like, for instance, my teachers who, shake their finger at you and say, no, don't post photos online. You're going to be screwed over in your career. Like, don't use Facebook. Don't use anything. And I think those kind of mixed messages coming from all over the place really confuse students and give them the wrong idea towards what social media is used for.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree. I'm confused, but I see how people use it around me, and I'm fascinated. Like, my husband is a really good example of someone who uses Twitter like as a researcher. He's just constant. He follows people in different clusters by interest, and he's a lurker. I mean, he very rarely gets involved, but he'll it's an amazing research tool. It doesn't just have to be about putting yourself out there and protecting your identity. A lot of it can just be about knowing what's going on and figuring out where you fit in, and that's essential for getting a job nowadays.
Absolutely. And so I guess one of the things we were kind of talking about is distraction. And I want to read this quote. There's a great book. I've got a few books I wanted to promote. It's called Program or Be Programmed by Douglas Rushkoff, and it's 10 Commandments for a Digital Age. I think it's absolutely brilliant. And I wanted to read, I've underlined so much of the book that I can barely find out where I wanted. Okay, so he says, we're living through a real shift, one that has already crashed our economy twice, changed the way we educate and entertain ourselves, and altered the very fabric of human relationships. Yet so far we have very little understanding of what is happening to us and how to cope. Most of the smartest folks who could help us are too busy consulting companies and teaching them how to maintain their faltering monopolies in the face of the digital tsunami. So who has time to consider much else? And who's really going to pay for it? But it's a conversation that needs to be started now. So please accept this first effort as a poetics of digital media and the humble spirit in which it is offered, 10 simple commandments that might help us forge a path to the digital realm. And I mean, this book is brilliant, and there's many other good books, but I just feel like I hope this is the first of many discussions on Higher Ed Live where we can talk about this. One of the things I've been reading about is distraction, and I posted one of these articles from Slate when they're talking about, is students really even learning because they're spending so much time checking their devices while studying, it's impairing their memory. And one of the things that I've been researching is different kind of human intelligences, and I feel like the fundamental reasons people succeed, whether that's your self-control, whether that's your emotional intelligence and ability to communicate, whether that's ability to stay focused and be goal-oriented, all of these things that are really fundamental to humans creating and achieving things are being kind of attacked in some way, shape, or form by digital media because you're constantly distracted and you're don't have the self-control to stay goal-oriented. So I would say to the artists, there's this balance where I wanted to, half of me says to students, you need to use social media as a tool that you should be promoting yourself and learning, and also you need to just turn it off. And you need to be able to be in your own head, because if you can't, turn these mediums and these devices off, you're going to be used by them, and you're not going to be using them. And I think that's the biggest and most important message that I want to convey, but something that I struggle with myself.
Have you seen any of these apps that you can, what is it called? I forget, iOS block or something, where you can tell it to not work from this time until this time?
Yeah.
Those are really effective. I haven't used them, but I know people that should use them.
I've been trying to experiment where I just turn off my phone. I just say it's off. It's done. Like, no need to be a part of this. But it's tough because some people can take it personally. If you were to not text back your friends if they had texting you, what is that relationship like with your peers if you're to just not text back or turn off your phone?
I mean, it depends. Like, it depends how close you are with a person, but I think that back where it's been like, I see people tweeting at each other instead of texting each other, when it's like, okay, you're on the same device. Why do you need, the whole world to see it? And so I think that, yeah, people can get offended if you don't respond right away. It happens.
Wow.
Mayan, you're kind of the voice of Oberlin on social media accounts and do a lot of innovative things with students. Do you ever feel like you're so connected in all these different things that it kind of spreads you too thin, or what's your take running social media for that institution?
The really hard part about it is that I'm the human being behind the technology, and I need to do it for me, and I need to do it for Oberlin, and I need to not do it for both those things more than I need to be doing it. So I know it sounds a little bit strange, but I don't know. My phone's with me all the time. I actively leave it in different rooms in the house from me at this point because it's much healthier for my mind and for my body to not have my phone with me all the time. Like, the ringer is still on. The only notification that will come to me is a text message or a phone call, so if it's like it's super important, it'll get to me that way. But I don't check my email when I'm at night unless I've consciously made the decision to do so. I try not to check Facebook in the evenings because that's my work. That's not actually a place for friends anymore. So I don't know. I think the interesting part is that the 9-to-5 workday really doesn't fit with managing social media. But I'm also trying to figure out what managing social media for an institution really means. And I ask that question every single day. And I think for some places it's be on all the time and be available all the time. And for us, that's not physically possible. I don't know what the value is for us even if it were physically possible, because we just don't have the critical mass of people online all the time for that to be a really valuable thing. So I don't know. It's hard. I think that I'm better at what I do when I'm not by my tech, because I'm usually out talking to people or communicating with more than one person. So rather than like, I love doing hangouts like this, but I would prefer us all to be sitting in the same room doing it. So this is kind of like that intermediary thing where like I'm using tech to reach more people that I'm personally invested with, but I don't feel the same way about most of my social networks and most of my social presences right now. So it's exhausting. I feel like everything I do is branding myself somewhere online, whether I'm doing it for me or for Oberlin. And yeah, it's a little overwhelming to think about. But I want to say that it's like kind of paid off in some ways, because like my boss just went to the CASE Social Media and Community Conference, and every time Oberlin was mentioned, he tweeted at me. And that was really cool, because that's all awesome stuff that we've been doing, and somebody paid attention somewhere, which was awesome. Those are not necessarily the people I was trying to reach, but like somebody heard it and thought it was a good idea. So that's investing time in the places that we felt it was important to do so. So it's not be everywhere always. It's know where to do stuff at the right time. Yeah, strategy.
So I wanted to go down and kind of ask the panelists if there was anything that we didn't touch on, something that really needs to be said when we're talking about students' digital identity development. I'm glad we didn't just talk about, hey, students, know that what you post online is going to like impact you, because that's kind of, teased out. I've seen a lot of that. But does anybody else have any other anecdotes or things that you want to recommend? Are the listeners, I'm happy to take any questions from the hashtag, although I can't seem to find my phone. Something that we didn't talk about, or any last words.
And I just want to hear from you guys, like what kind of advice you have to students to put themselves out there, and like what kind of connections that you hope or you think that they should make in social media, and what kind of connections will be beneficial to them. Richard?
I'll take a step. We need to come up. One of the things we need to come up with is the name. It's like the digital light, like Sooth. I don't know what it is. It's the digital tour guide. Somebody that's like I'm doing that for her right now, and Mary Claire does that for her students. I don't know what it's called, but it needs to be coined because it's a very important role. But I think you should have your places where you have your kind of your former connections, and that's fine. But I wouldn't spend all your time, going through your old connections. As you're going off to college, I think the biggest thing is to meet new people, and that is going to open up a whole new world. So finding places with your Twitter account or, just in person of moving forward into making new connections, is having a space where you can do that really freely is important. And then having a space where you can also kind of keep in touch with people is this other kind of utility that's important. But don't be afraid to kind of separate those. And for what you did, which I think is really awesome, is you have the new Twitter account where you're kind of starting fresh and going to be using that to learn and explore. And I think that's really important to kind of experiment. And maybe you turn it off, and maybe you go back to your friend's account, or maybe you never use your old account that was locked in. I mean, it's really for you to decide. But I hope this is the first foray of you into, kind of using the internet to its full potential and reaching your full potential and changing the world, because Mari's a world changer, as I like to tell her. And
I love that we're just talking to Mari as if she's like every student ever. That usually frustrates me a lot, but I find it really sweet for this show. My advice actually is the advice that I didn't know how to articulate to myself, but I'm really, really glad that I did it, which is just make stuff. And that sounds really silly, but the giant world of the internet is very much consumer-based, and if you're making really interesting stuff, you doing your own social media really won't matter in the same way that making something cool makes other people talk about you. The whole reason I got my student jobs here was because of work that I'd done online. The reason I got my first job and the job that I'm currently in is because I was making stuff and people took notice.
Making what kind of stuff?
So so actually for me it all came down to blogging in some capacity or another. I started my first blog when I was in high school. The second I got to college, that blog turned into a photo blog where I posted one photograph every single day of my college life. Someone in the communications office found it 3 years later and was like, "You've taken close to 1,000 photographs documenting every single day that you've been at Oberlin. We should figure out some way to make this into something more." So I turned into a student blogger. I helped them make new admissions materials based on my pictures, all of that. I don't know what make more stuff means to you. I don't know what kind of things you love. You, Mari, you, every single person in the world. But it's fascinating because even the students in our incoming class group, the ones that I can tell you are going to be awesome people are the ones that have shown me something that they've made, and I can talk about that. I don't really know what to talk about when it comes to them. I know what they've made in the context of the group. There's this kid that took their new class shirt and cut it up and made this really cool modified t-shirt. I don't even know this kid's name, but it was an awesome redesign, and it's great. And then another kid introduced themselves with a song. I don't know the name of the kid. I just know they got a really cool song. So I don't know what it means to make stuff to everyone, but just making something cool means it turns into something else. So I don't know. The social media channels all help amplify that way more, but yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I guess for me, my advice that I tell my students is to just think about what you're doing and document it. I just think they should document everything, and they can put it in a place, and it can be this is documented, this is raw, this is, you know, and tag it for yourself, and then look back and pay attention to how these, because 10 years from now, if you look at the work that you did your freshman year in college, you're going to see yourself repeating certain things over and over and over again as you grow and as you learn. And there's a narrative that lives there that's really organic and really honest. And once you're able to crystallize that, then you can really start to market yourself, and you can really start to be a name and have a voice. Have a voice as an artist, and also have a voice in the conversation of your field, and be taken seriously. So what I tell my students is just, you know, document yourself and do it well. Use high quality stuff. Use a good microphone. Don't have noise in the background. Don't have the story. I mean, like, it's like really basic, and be a librarian of yourself. And, you know, you don't have to show it all to the world, but keep it for yourself and these digital tools. And, you know, later on you can draw from it, and you can use it to create a really strong narrative about who you are and what you do.
Awesome. So the conclusion I think everybody is coming to is create something. And in the future, that's all really what we can do, is create something. We're all some sort of kind of entrepreneur or entrepreneurial in our organizations, that we have to create things that people want to spend time with. And the attention economy is a concept that I love. Both it's that we need to create things that are amazing enough to get people's attention, and I think that's half of it. And the other half of it is that we need to focus our attention as individuals and not let technology rule our lives, but use it as a tool for our lives, for our kind of creation and our life's work. So I hope we can continue this conversation, you know, maybe offline, maybe in person when I'm back in Ohio this summer. I miss the lovely Ohio spring, so I hope you guys are enjoying it. We have a cloudy, windy, chilly San Francisco day, which I also love. But that's all that I have right now for this episode of Higher Ed Live. I want to make sure you guys join us next week, next Thursday night in Higher Ed Live. Drew Milliken and Stephen Porter is going to discuss independent schools and social media. This is really a different realm. I was at an Ed Social Media conference in Boston, and the independent school market, they were talking about how social media is very different in the K through 12 space. And one of the horror stories that I heard is that a student was applying to college and had tweeted something about some cuss word, and tagged the college on Twitter, the admissions page or the admissions Twitter account, and got rejected from the university because they were being blatantly boisterous and kind of disrespectful. And this was really a top student they had, and he was really devastated by it. And I was really sad to hear the story, but I just think it's an important lesson that kid's going to learn, and hopefully, you know, think twice before posting online. And hopefully we can all be more mindful in our actions and how that's affecting others. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. I really appreciate all the panelists and their wonderful work that they're doing. And Hillary had to go because of the rain, but she gives you all her best. And I look forward to seeing you next week on Higher Ed Live.